my crafty friends, it's me, Lisa the DIY Diva, and I have been so busy making lots of new crafts with supplies that I got at the Dollar Tree. So get ready for a whole bunch of fall crafting.
It all just goes away. The things I plan to say, oh baby.
And I thought I'd get started with an easy craft. Now, isn't this a beautiful frame? I got this at my last trip to the Dollar Tree, and I just fell in love with this frame. It is so pretty. But I thought I could maybe add something a little bit extra to it to make it really specifically for my fall decorating. So I disassembled the frame, took out the glass and everything, so I'm just left with the frame itself. I took some Deco Art acrylic paint. This is in, I think it's like a golden sunset. I don't even know what color this is. I thought this would be a great color for a picture frame. So I just put some acrylic paint onto the frame and you guessed it, I painted the entire frame. And I'm using a larger paintbrush. I don't know what kind this is. I will leave links to these paintbrushes in the description box below because these are probably my favorite types of paintbrushes to use for my crafting. And with this being raw wood, it really accepted the paint very nicely. So I only had to do one coat of paint on the picture frame. Talk about easy. And then I went online and I found a really cute fall printable. And at first I was going to make it a square, but I decided I liked it better by just cutting out the print itself. Then I found this plaid paper online again. I believe this is from Mother Time. So I just cut this down so that it will fit into this picture frame. And I just used the original backing that was the picture in the frame. And then I secured the round printable to the plaid printable. And all that was left to do was to reassemble the frame, putting everything back together, and this project is all done. How easy was that? And I really love this. It's so easy, it's so cute, and it really makes a nice addition to my fall decorating this year. And how about another easy craft? This is an owl from the Dollar Tree. I know you've seen these before. These are so much fun to make over and very easy to make over too. So I just took some Folk Art white chalk paint and I painted the owl with the chalk paint. The entire owl, everything except the bottom. Got a pretty heavy coat of the chalk paint. I tend to be a little bit heavy-handed when it comes to painting things like this because it just looks so pretty. But if you want to do several smaller coats, you could do that as well. And one of the reasons that I like using the chalk paint for projects like this is because it's a thicker paint and it just seems to adhere well to everything. So I only had to do one coat of paint for this project. And when it was dry, look at this. I have an owl and I also have a pine cone. And now all I'm going to do is take some sandpaper and I'm just going to sand off the edges. Basically, wherever there is a raised edge, I'm going to sand it down with the sandpaper. This will give it a really fun distressed look, kind of a farmhouse look, or I guess you could call it a farmhouse fall look as well. But these ceramic pieces are great if you want to do a little bit of distressing or make the pieces look vintage. Look at how pretty that is. And here is the owl all finished. And this is actually the second one I've done because my daughter liked it so much, she took home the first one. And here is another easy project. I'm going to be using some different embellishments like this jute twine. I'm going to go ahead and cut a bow out of that. And I'm also going to grab some other extra things that I have. And I'm going to take this Dollar Tree Grateful and Thankful pumpkin and I'm just going to add these extra adornments or embellishments. I made a little bow, I put that onto it, and then I started putting on pieces of raffia. I've had people comment in the past that you should never cut raffia. Well, I think you should do whatever you want to do when you're crafting. And I really like crafting like this. I like adding little single pieces of raffia underneath a bow because I like the way that looks. If you don't want to cut your raffia, don't worry, you don't have to. But for me, I like doing things like this, and maybe it's different, but it's not wrong, because with crafting, there really isn't anything wrong if you get the end result that you want, right? So I just continued taking little pieces of raffia, and I secured that to the first bow using hot glue, and then I made a second bow and I put that on top, so you can't tell that those are single pieces of raffia. Next, I came back with some strands of the pip berries, and I just attached those underneath the bows on the larger pumpkin and added a few more strands of raffia. And this is the project. Look at how cute this is, and that was so easy. The Dollar Tree has some really great fall decorations this year, and it's really easy to personalize them and make them what you want them to be for your themed decor. I have been collecting these wreath forms from the Dollar Tree for a couple of years now, and I'm finally going to put one of them to use. Well, I did one last year too, but I wanted to really up this one a little bit. So I wanted to see if I could detach the center wires of the pumpkin. At first I tried to rip it apart, that didn't work. Then I tried pliers, that didn't work. So I came back with my Husky nippers. This is a nipping tool, and this was the tool that it took to get this wire disconnected from the pumpkin frame. Now, I only did this on one side. I didn't do it on both sides because then that would totally take it off, and I want to be able to reattach this. So I just cut the bottom end of each of those wire pieces in the center. Next, I came back with some wooden beads, and I filled each of the internal wire strands with the beads. And I believe these beads are 1 inch in diameter, and each of these wire strands took 17 beads to fill up all the way down to the bottom. And this is the time of year that you can find these pumpkin wreath forms at Dollar Tree. You can also find them online, you can find them at Hobby Lobby, but for $1.25, you get the same size wreath form from Dollar Tree. And I wanted to say a huge hello to Angie at the Dollar Tree in Parker, Colorado. Oh my goodness. On my last trip there, she was so incredible and helpful, and I just wanted to say, hi, Angie. So I just continued working my way down each of those wire strands. And then what I did was use a little bit of E6000 to secure the cut wire back onto the frame. Now the E6000 doesn't have an instant hold, so I also did use a little bit of hot glue while I was securing the wire strands back in place. Now, if you're anything like me, when you get to the end of the E6000 tube, it is really difficult to roll. But I found these keys, I think that's what they're called, on Amazon. These have made a huge difference in my crafting. And then to make sure that the glue was completely set up, I did leave this alone for 24 hours before I came back to the next part of the project. Now I'm going to take this macrame cord. I got this on Amazon, and this is in a natural color. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap this all the way around the wire frame that's still showing on the pumpkin wreath. And the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to see that wire. I want this to look like it's all one piece. I saw something really similar to this at Home Goods, and it was so pretty. And I wanted to see if I could make something similar myself. Now I did cut strips of the macrame cord, so it wasn't one solid piece that I continually wrapped around the wreath form. I did just secure it with hot glue as I went along because I want to make sure that that macrame cord stays nice and tight all the way around the outer portion of the pumpkin wreath. And when I came to one of the beaded strands, I just wrapped it around on either side and made sure to glue it in place. And then I just continued wrapping all the way around the rest of the wreath form. I like that look so much better, but I do want to add a stem to my pumpkin. And I thought it would look really nice to make this look like a really rustic stem. So I went out and just picked up some twigs and sticks from my yard, and then using my hot glue gun, I glued them one at a time to the stem or the stem outline. And then to make sure they were all the same size, I just used my husky nippers or even just like a wire cutter to make sure all of those sticks are pretty close to the same length. And as I got closer and closer to the pumpkin, I just made the sticks shorter. Look at how pretty that is. Oh my gosh, I am loving this so far, but I do want to add some greenery. So I just took some faux greenery, which had different shades of green, and I just glued those to the top of my pumpkin. And then using this really pretty wire edged ribbon, I did make a bow to go into the center. There are so many different ways that you can make bows like this. For this one, my bow is going to have 4 loops, and then I just used a chenille stem, also known as a pipe cleaner, and I just wrapped that around the center. And then I trimmed down those chenille stems. And then I cut a piece of the wire ribbon, just a smaller piece, so that that's going to go around the chenille stem on the center and look like the center of the bow. And for each of the tails, I did them separately, and I secured each one right below the stem of the pumpkin. I just gathered up the ribbon and joined it with some hot glue. And once that was in place, then I put the center of the bow on top. And I wanted the ribbon to look like it was kind of flowing, kind of like a waterfall type effect. So I did hot glue a little bit of it to the beads. And then all that was left to do was to attach a hanger to the back so I can hang up my wreath. Look at, isn't it so pretty? And here is the wreath all complete and hanging up. This project was really easy to do. It did take a little bit of time, but I think the end results speak for themselves. I think it looks beautiful. I am really happy that I did wrap that macrame cord all the way around the outer edge. I think that makes the wreath look a little more high end, and I think it's just beautiful. Now this is a Dollar Tree crate. And this is some gel stain from Hobby Lobby. So what I did was just take that gel stain and put it onto the crate, and then I just rubbed it in with an old towel. I've never used gel stains before, but I really liked this color. I believe this color is in maple, and I thought it would look really nice to be like a crate that was holding pumpkins. So I just stained the entire crate, all 4 sides, and a little bit on the inside as well. Then I found these pumpkins at Hobby Lobby, and they were $6.99, so they were 40% off. And I just separated each of those pumpkins from the stick that they were on. And look at how many pumpkins I was able to get. This was actually more affordable than if I went to Dollar Tree, and these are like velvet pumpkins. They're so pretty. And then I just took some floral foam and put that into the bottom of the crate to basically raise up the bottom a little bit, so you'll be able to see my pumpkins a little bit better, and I won't have to use as many of them. I secured the 3 bottom pumpkins to the floral foam. And then I came back with some Spanish moss and I filled in any of the blank areas where the foam was showing. And then I just filled in the empty spaces with some more pumpkins. Next, I came back with some craft paper and some distressing ink, and I want to put a sign on my crate that says pumpkins. And I used some distressing ink around the sides to make it look a little bit older. And I also did it with a smaller piece too, because I want to have a price tag on my pumpkins. Then I came back with this stamp, and I like this stamp because it's just letters, but they connect together. So I connected the letters together to spell out pumpkins. Then using some stamping ink, I put pumpkins onto my little piece of cardstock. And I don't have any stamps that have numbers on them, so I was testing out different inks on this cardstock paper to see what it would look like, trying to determine which one was going to be the best to write out the numbers 2 and 5 and a cents sign. I don't even know if people use the cent sign anymore, but I'm going to have my pumpkins be 25 cents. Then I just secured the cardstock to my crate. And I did want to embellish it with a tiny jute bow, so I did put a little tiny bow onto the crate as well. And here is my crate of pumpkins sitting on a shelf. And I'm sorry about the glow. That was from one of the lights that's sitting there as well. But this pumpkin crate is so cute. It was so easy to make. And I think it would be a really cute addition for your decor this year. Now, I have seen this block on Etsy when I've been looking for ideas, and it just says happy. And I've always wanted to make a block like this. So I had this tiny little stamping set, and I took a couple of Jenga blocks and I just put happy on it. But for me, stamping is not really, I'm not that good at it. And for me, it's really challenging. So I did try this a couple more times using the Jenga blocks and trying to get all of my letters lined up and with my little period at the end. And I mean, they're not horrible, but I think I could do something a little bit better with my Cricut machine. So I took some stencil material and using different fonts, I cut out the word happy with a period at the end. Then I just put them on some plain wood scraps that I had. And I burnished the stencil material onto the wood, really making sure that it is secure onto the wood. And then I removed the transfer tape so that the stencil is on the wood and not anything else. And this was a happy accident that I learned. I didn't have anything to stencil the happy onto, so I just took some Dollar Tree sponges. These are like the magic eraser sponges, and I just dabbed that into some burnt umber paint and used that for my stamping. And I'm telling you, these little sponges are fantastic for doing stencils. And something else that I learned is acrylic paint works better than chalk paint for stenciling. And if you do light coats of paint and do several coats of that light coat of paint, the stencil actually turns out really nice. And another tip is that you want to remove the stencil while the paint is still wet. If you wait until it's dry, then you run the risk that it's going to remove some of the paint where you wanted it to stay onto whatever project it is that you were stenciling. And I don't know why I like this so much, but it really spoke to me. So I really wanted to make these blocks, these happy blocks, so that I can incorporate it into my decorating. I think for Christmas, I'm going to do some that say merry and bright and just different words like that. But here is the end result, my happy block. And it really does make me happy seeing how cute this turned out. I have these two wooden pumpkins from the Dollar Tree, and they're both blank, so nothing is on them. They're just blank wood. and I'm going to combine the two of these so that it's going to be one larger pumpkin. So after I removed all of the extra stuff like the labels, then I had to figure out where to cut the stem off of the first pumpkin, the one that's going to be on top. So I took it out in my garage, cut off the stem, and then sanded it down. Then I brought it back into my craft room and using some folk art dark antiquing wax and all of the smaller pieces of the pumpkin, so like the background of the pumpkin, I stained all of those. I left the center raised pieces the natural color, and it is okay that some of that wax gets onto the center. That won't matter in a little bit. Then I came back with some Dollar Tree wood glue and I secured that pumpkin to the larger pumpkin. Next, I came back with some black acrylic paint, and I really thought I wanted this to be black, but the closer I got to being finished with it, I decided I didn't really like the dark paint with the darker wax. It is pretty, so if you wanted to do something like this, that's what it would look like. But that's not what I wanted. So once that had time to dry, I came back with some folk art parchment acrylic paint, and I painted all of the black with the lighter paint. Now, it did take a couple of coats of that parchment colored paint to cover up the black completely. And I was just really careful to make sure that I did not get that white onto the stained part of the pumpkin. I do like this a lot better. I really like this look better. But I did want to add a little bit of darker color to the outer edge of the pumpkin. So I came back with some painter's tape and I taped off a small portion all the way around the outer edge of the pumpkin. And then I came back with the wax and I just painted the edges. Sometimes when you're crafting, you have a project or an idea in your head and you think you want to do it, but halfway through you decide, you know what, that's just not what I want. So that's what happened with this project. And once I was done painting, then I removed the painter's tape. And I decided I wanted to hang some beads from the center of the pumpkin. So I just took some black beads and put it onto some jute twine. I made a little tassel at the end and then just wrapped it around the stem of the pumpkin. And then I took some raffia bows from other projects that I've had in the past and I glued two of those together and then I attached them to the top of my bead strand. I really like this pumpkin. I think it looks cute, but I did want to add one more thing. So I had some leaves and I gave it a quick paint job and there is my project. I really like how this turned out. I think the dark and the lighter colors go really well together, at least for my decorating. What about you? Would you have left this black or would you make it the antique parchment color? Now here is another Dollar Tree pumpkin, and then I have this fall ribbon that I got from, I think I got this from Michael's. I cut several pieces of this ribbon and the edges are wired, so I did go ahead and remove that as well. What I'm going to be doing is covering this pumpkin with this ribbon, but I wanted the strands to be thinner. And then I had this orange pumpkin print that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I also cut this down into strips a little bit thinner than the first strips that I made of that ribbon. I started by taking that plaid ribbon and putting that all around the pumpkin. And I just used the hot glue to secure it in place, and like I always do with all of my pumpkins, whatever I do on one side, I go back and do the same on the opposite side to keep the material even throughout the project. Next, I came back with the Dollar Tree fabric and I folded it up just a little bit. and I secured these pieces to the pumpkin as well. I didn't secure the edges. I kind of like the edges being up a little bit. I want this to look like a rustic pumpkin, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes by leaving it a little bit rough or ragged makes it perfect, I think. And I just continued this process all around the pumpkin. I wanted to use more of the Dollar Tree material than the plaid material. So on a couple of the sections, I actually wrapped the Dollar Tree material around my finger just to raise it up and make it look a little more rough as well. Then I came back with these Dollar Tree stickers, and I thought this would be really pretty for a tag for my pumpkin. This pumpkin isn't just any pumpkin. I'm going to make a pumpkin muffin. I thought this would be so cute for adding to a tiered tray or just even on its own. So I took the Dollar Tree stickers and I also used some pinking shears to give a little bit of a different texture to the scrapbooking paper that's going to be on the back. And then I used my stamping letters that I got from Michael's that can connect together, and I had to find all of the letters to spell out pumpkin. So once I had spelled out pumpkin, then I used some distressing ink to stamp the word pumpkin onto my Dollar Tree sticker. Then I stamped the word spice. So this is going to say pumpkin spice on my cute little pumpkin muffin. Then I came back with some wired craft paper and just twirled that around a paintbrush to get a nice little twirl. And I also made a jute bow. Then I took a couple of rustic buttons and glued those together. And then I also had some little adornments. These are some pip berries along with some leaves. And I'm going to be attaching all of those to the top of my pumpkin. A little bit of the leaves, and then I'm also going to put on a homemade stem that I made. Then I came back with some of the pip berries. And I'm just going to work my way around the top of the pumpkin. Next, I secured the buttons to the pumpkin. Then I added in the craft paper. And then I determined where I wanted my pumpkin spice little sign to go. And while I was putting this in place, I did bend it a little bit so it would look a little more aged. And once all of those top adornments were in place, then I came back and attached the jute bow. I added another wooden leaf to the top of the pumpkin, and I think that looks really cute. But I want to add a little bit more rustic or primitive look to this, so I came back with some cinnamon and I just sprinkled that all around the top of the pumpkin, and then I did a little bit of the sides of the material too. If you've never used cinnamon in your crafting, it really does give, I guess, more of a primitive look to it. And I really like that look. Then I found this tin. I thought this looked like a perfect cupcake tin. And so what I'm going to do is put in some different Spanish moss and then some different pieces. I think this is some kind of a moss. I don't know. I got this at Michael's. And I added a little bit of hot glue because I'm going to secure my pumpkin muffin into the tin. Look at that. Isn't that so pretty? And here is my pumpkin spice muffin sitting in my decor. I love this so much. It really was a fun project. And sometimes it does take a little bit of extra time. Not every project can be super, super easy, but I think this one is definitely worth it. Orange Dollar Tree pumpkin. Oh, and look at that. The stem and toothpick came out all at the same time. And I'm going to be using this all-purpose caulk, which I also got at the Dollar Tree. And I just cut the end off, and now I'm just going to draw onto the pumpkin. I'm just going to make different designs. I didn't have a pattern or anything to go off of. I just figured I would draw some big loopy circles. And I just did this all around the pumpkin. And when there were blank spaces, I just put little dots of the caulk. And that's what it looks like. So now I need to let that dry. And I'm going to use another pumpkin for this project, and this one is also $1.25, but it has this velvet material on the top, and I went ahead and removed that because I just want the foam pumpkin underneath the material. Next, I came back with some vintage white folk art paint, and I added in some baking soda to give the paint some texture. And then I just painted the entire pumpkin. And the baking soda gives this paint so much texture that it makes it so you can cover up all of the styrofoam. So when I'm done, this pumpkin is not going to look like a styrofoam pumpkin. I love the texture that baking soda can give to paint. And once I was finished with that, I set it off to dry. And then I came back to my caulk covered pumpkin. Now I had this orange metallic paint that I got from Hobby Lobby, and I thought that would look really pretty all over this pumpkin. If you wanted to, you could do 2 coats of paint to really see the difference of the caulking material and the pumpkin itself, but I wasn't too worried about that because I'm going to be making a display with this pumpkin and the white pumpkin. So I just wanted them to look different, but both have some texture. And this is what it looks like when it's all dry. This is the bottom pumpkin. And here is my adorable little textured pumpkin. So I took the larger pumpkin and I'm going to put the white textured pumpkin on top. And I'm using this B7000 glue. I bought this on Amazon. It's kind of similar to E6000, but it's really hard to get out of the container. So I put some glue onto the orange pumpkin as well as the bottom of the white pumpkin, and then I secured them together. Now I want to have a riser for these pumpkins to sit on, so I took this lid from a Dollar Tree box and I just painted it with some folk art chalk paint. And this is just white chalk paint. I like to use chalk paint when I'm painting pieces like this because it will cover all of that glitter and all of the different colors in one coat of paint. Now, once everything was dry, I came back and I took my 2-tiered pumpkin and I used some hot glue on the bottom of the orange pumpkin to attach it to the riser. Then I came back with some Dollar Tree garland. This is a fall leaf garland, as well as some different pieces of fall florals. And I just secured different parts to the pumpkins. So I made sure to put some flowers on the bottom as well as in between the 2 pumpkins. I want this piece to be able to just set out all by itself. And by adding the different floral pieces in between and on top of the pumpkins, it will make it so that it can pretty much just be on its own like a decor piece. Now, I forgot to show you that I did add a pumpkin stem. Of course, you have to have a pumpkin stem, but this is the end result of my, I guess it is a pumpkin topiary, but there's only 2 pumpkins. I think it turned out really nice, and I really love that painting technique with the baking soda paint on the white pumpkin. And for this pumpkin, it was another orange pumpkin that I had. So I cut the top out using a X-Acto knife. And then I flipped it over and did the same thing on the bottom. I just cut a hole out of the center of the pumpkin. Then I had this faux leather from Dollar Tree. This stuff is so fun, and I have wanted to do this project for so long, so I was so happy I was able to find the faux leather. But what I did was cut it down into strips. For 1 box of the leather, I cut the strips larger, probably about 1 inch to 1.5 inches wide. And then for the other leather that I had, I cut those strips about 1/2 inch wide. So I'm going to start with the larger strips of the faux leather, and I'm going to secure them to the pumpkin. Now I have to tell you, this faux leather is so much fun to work with. When you put it onto the pumpkin, it stretches and it gives a really nice appearance to the pumpkin. I've been wanting to make this for so long, and I was really impressed at how much fun this faux leather was to work with. And I just continued to cover the entire pumpkin with the larger pieces of the faux leather. And I was able to get the pumpkin mostly covered with just 1 box of that faux leather. But I wanted to elevate it a little bit, so that was why I decided to use some thinner strips on top of the wider strips that I used. And I know this is a faux leather foam pumpkin, but it's really pretty. I think this is probably one of my favorite pumpkins so far that I've done. I love how this leather looks on the pumpkin. And then I came back with one of my homemade pumpkin stems, and I secured that to the top of the pumpkin. I think that would look good even just like that, but I did want to add a little bit of something extra, so I cut down some Dollar Tree leaves and made smaller leaves out of them to attach to the top of my pumpkin next to the stem. And then I added some pip berries, or are they pit berries? The debate is still going on, pip or pit. Leave me a comment and let me know what you think they're called. And there is my leather pumpkin. Oh my gosh, this one is probably my favorite craft so far. This pumpkin turned out so nice. I am so happy with how this looks. It does not look like a Dollar Tree foam pumpkin. And it was so simple to do. I love these. They're almost like giant bottle caps, but they also make really great pie tins. So I'm going to make some pumpkin pies with these. So the larger one you can buy at Dollar Tree, and the smaller one is a Christmas ornament. Again, you can find it at Dollar Tree. Now I did have some Sculpey clay. This is the clay that you can bake in the oven, but I didn't bake mine. I just wanted to see if this would work. So I took the orange, and it did take the entire package of the Sculpey clay for me to put it into the smaller Christmas ornament. But look at it, it looks like pumpkin pie. Now I also had some air dry clay, so I just took a big portion of this and I rolled it out so that my goal is to have it fit into this metal piece that I got from the Dollar Tree. And the air dry clay actually worked really well for this. I just had to remove the excess clay from around the outside of the metal pie tin. It looks like a pie tin, so I'm going to call it a pie tin. Then I used a little rolling pin just to smooth it down. And by doing it like this, it worked really well. And I also painted the air dry clay before it had time to dry out. I didn't know if it would crack or anything, but it didn't. It is actually perfect. And I know you've seen people do this before, but I'm going to be using some spackling, compound spackling paste for my whipped cream for my pies. But one thing that I've found that works really well is I double up on those frosting bags because sometimes the spackling is hard to get out of the bag. And I've actually had the bags rip on me in the past, and I don't want that to happen. This DAP Fast and Final spackle is the absolute best that I have worked with when I'm making different crafts like this and I want to have whipped cream. So I just took that spackle and using a craft stick, I put it into my doubled up frosting bag. And I do have a star tip that's on the end for the frosting or spackle to come out. Now, I'm not the best at doing this decorating. I'm not the best cake decorator, but using a star tip, it's actually pretty easy. And look at that, it really looks like whipped cream. And you can also see that I did paint the air dry clay with orange acrylic paint. And this is a Spiced Pumpkin is the name of the paint. Making these faux foods or desserts is so much fun. I love doing this. And I added a big dollop of whipped cream right in the middle of the pie. And then I just repeated this process with the smaller pumpkin pie that I have. Again, I'm not the best cake decorator, but that's okay. This is just going to go on one of my tiered trays. And of course, I had to add a dollop of whipped cream right in the center as well. Look at how adorable that is. Oh my gosh, I love these pumpkin pies. They are so cute and they were really easy to make. Now, this is a really fun project. I got this yarn at Hobby Lobby for $3.49. It was on clearance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this yarn onto a Dollar Tree foam pumpkin. So I cut the yarn into strands, and each strand is 24 inches long. And I'm going to be braiding this yarn together. So for each braid, you need to have 6 pieces of yarn that is 2 foot long. Next, I took some twine and I secured 6 pieces of the yarn and I just tied a knot around the top end. And one thing that I learned when tying twine like this by yourself, if you don't have someone to hold, like put their finger in the middle of it, if you wrap the twine a couple of times before you go to tighten it, it will keep the twine nice and tight. So when you're doing a knot, you just repeat the process and you just tie it. So I guess that's a square knot. And then I just removed the excess twine. And I also removed the excess yarn from the top of the braid. Then using something to weigh it down, I just braided the yarn together. So each portion of the braid has 2 strands of the yarn. And this yarn is like a thick, chunky blanket type yarn. And braiding isn't hard to do. You just fold the ends over top of each other and work your way down all of the strands until you get till the end. And once I got to the end, I took another piece of the twine and I just did my square knot again. And again, I wrapped it around a couple of times. So instead of one time, I did like 3 times, and that will help to keep that string nice and tight as you finish your square knot. So there are all of my braided strands of yarn, and I have 9 in total. So then what I did was take another piece of the twine. So I folded each braid in half, and I took another piece of twine and tied it around the center. Then I took another piece of twine and I tied it very close to the first piece. Then this is in the middle of the braid. And once I had removed the excess twine, then I cut in between those 2 pieces of twine. So now my one braid has become 2. And you can see this is how it's going to wrap around the pumpkin. So my 9 braids have become 18. And I know it looks like it's a lot of work, but I promise it isn't. So here's my Dollar Tree foam pumpkin. I got this last year. I still have a lot of these, thankfully. And I just cut the top center out on the pumpkin. And then I flipped it over and I cut a big circle on the bottom as well. And what I'm going to be doing is taking the braided yarn and putting it into those 2 holes, the top and the bottom. Now, just in case there was any of the pumpkin that was going to show, I did go ahead and paint this pumpkin orange so that it will mostly match the yarn. A lot of times I like to go to Hobby Lobby and find things like this yarn when it's on clearance. I had no idea of what I was going to use it for, but it was such a good deal, I could not pass it up. So once my pumpkin was dry, then I used my hot glue gun and I put a little bit of hot glue onto the center of the pumpkin where I had cut it out. Then I ran the glue down the side of the pumpkin. And then I just brought the yarn around the side and then tucked it into the bottom of the pumpkin. And I tried to keep the pieces of yarn equal. So what I did on one side of the pumpkin, then I did on the opposite side of the pumpkin. I find that by doing it this way, it's a lot easier to keep all of the braided pieces nice and straight. Now, I do have to tell you that once you get close to the end, it is very difficult to push that braided yarn into the hole because this yarn is really thick. So you could do this with the yarn that you find at the Dollar Tree as well. It's just going to take a lot more of those braided strands to completely cover the pumpkin. So I'm just continuing the process all the way around the pumpkin. And again, what I do on one side, I flip it over and do the exact same thing on the opposite side. And once the hole started getting really full, I did use a craft stick to help push that yarn down into the center of the pumpkin, both on the top and the bottom. And I also found that by spreading out the glue onto the foam pumpkin itself and then just kind of pushing the braids down, that way I made sure that none of that pumpkin was going to show through. And once I was finished covering the pumpkin, I did take my hot glue gun and really just put a lot of hot glue. This is actually the bottom of the pumpkin. And then I smushed it down onto my silicone mat. And I do want my pumpkin to have a nice stem. So I had this real pumpkin stem. Actually, I think it was from an acorn squash. So it wasn't quite thick enough for the pumpkin. So I took some of this braided rope and I just used my hot glue gun and I followed the direction of the pumpkin stem and I just glued the rope onto the stem. I just continued this process all around the stem, adding in new pieces of the rope. I did keep the rope a little bit long on either side of the pumpkin stem too. And when I got to some sections of the pumpkin stem, I just used a little bit of that braided rope just to fill it in because I don't want to see any of the original pumpkin stem. I want it to look like this rope. This is probably my new favorite technique for making rustic pumpkin stems. Now at the top of the stem, I did cut the rope all the way down so that it would just be at the end of the stem. And then I used a scissors just to remove any excess pieces. But you can see how that rope has become unbraided a little bit. That's what I wanted it to do. I want it to look like it's like coming out of the pumpkin. But for the top, I did go ahead and add in just one more small piece of that twine, and I just cut off any of the excess. And I left it a little bit longer at the base. And then just kind of roughed up the edges of the rope itself. Then all I had to do was secure it onto the top of my pumpkin. Look at how pretty that is. I love making pumpkin stems like this. So cute. I want to make it look like a wooden cutting board. And this pumpkin from the Dollar Tree is the perfect size. So it's nice and thick and chunky. And it just had this cardboard piece on the front. And I don't want that. So I just used a scraper to remove that. And then I used the scraper to remove all of the excess cardboard that was still left on the pumpkin. Now, someone had mentioned to make sure I show removing the tags. So here I am removing the tag from the back of the pumpkin, which will be the top of the pumpkin. So I am sanding everything down with the Dollar Tree sanding block. These things are wonderful. Then I took my favorite brown burnt umber paint and I painted the pumpkin brown. I made sure to get the sides as well because again, I want to make this look like a cutting board. And once my paint had dried, I didn't know how I was going to make this work. So I came back with some white paint and some more burnt umber, and I was trying to put lines on the pumpkin to make it look like wood. But as you can see, it really doesn't look too much like wood. It looks like a painted pumpkin. But sometimes you just have to trust the process. So I wasn't ready to give up, so I continued painting the burnt umber and the white paint on the pumpkin. Now I did come back with some other paints while that was still wet, and these are acrylic paints for painting, like if you're painting pictures. And I haven't used them for painting pictures, but I can tell you these are great for wood crafts too. So I just took different shades of brown and just drew lines of the paint onto the pumpkin. Now I think this is looking a little more like wood, which is the look that I wanted to get because I want this to look like it's a cutting board. Now I wouldn't use it as a cutting board. This is merely for decoration. But like I said, I just trusted the process and kept adding layers of paint to the pumpkin. The raw sienna is the color that looks orange on this, and I really like that on this piece. Now, once that was dry, I wanted to give this a matte finish. So I took some Deco Art Ultra Matte varnish, or it's a sealer, and I just used a foam brush to paint this onto my pumpkin. It gives a really nice soft appearance, and I also made sure to coat all of the sides as well. And here is my faux pumpkin cutting board. I am really happy with how this turned out. I really like it, and it works well as a riser for my other projects. Now, this is so much fun. I love these little pumpkins from Dollar Tree. There's so many things that you can do with them. So what I'm going to do is remove any of the embellishments, so those raffia bows, as well as the stems. And I had this scrapbook paper, which is kind of like cardstock. It's pretty thick. And what I did was cut it out so that it will cover each of the pumpkins. I thought about doing different colored pumpkins for each one, but in the end, I decided that this would be the best look. So then I used some Mod Podge, and I just put that onto the back of each of the pumpkins. And see, I removed the tag as well. And then I just smoothed down the paper onto the pumpkin. I repeated that process on all three of the pumpkins, so they will all be the same. And once the Mod Podge had dried, then I just used a Dollar Tree sanding block and I removed all of the excess paper from the pumpkin. The sanding block from Dollar Tree works really well, and you don't have to try and cut that scrapbooking paper. You can just sand it away. And this is how they turned out with just sanding it. So now I needed to give them some stems, and I went out into my yard, I found some sticks, and then I used my handy little table saw. I guess this is a table saw, and I cut the stick down to size for each of my pumpkins, and then I used my hot glue gun and secured the stems into the holes that are already pre-drilled in the pumpkins. I wanted to add a little bit of something extra to my pumpkins. So I took some Spanish moss, and using my hot glue gun, I just secured that to the top on either side of the stem. But I just went around the stem, so it's all just one solid piece of the Spanish moss. And then I used some other embellishments like these paper leaves. I believe I got these at Hobby Lobby. And I also made some tags, and I just used rubber stamps to put the words onto the pumpkins. And each pumpkin has a different tag, and I just used a little bit of baker's twine to have the tag hang from the pumpkin. And now I have 3 cute little pumpkins that say, I love fall. Now I had this frame that I got from Goodwill, and I also had this burlap ribbon. I really wanted to do like one solid piece of burlap, but I didn't have any. So I made do with what I had. So I just secured the burlap ribbon to the back of the sign that I got from Goodwill. I just wanted to make sure that that cardboard backing was all covered. And then I flipped over the sign and I secured the remnants or the leftover piece to the back of the sign. And that's what that looks like. Next, I took a tape measure and measured off the sign because I want to make sure I get my pumpkin centered. And I put the middle pumpkin in the middle of the burlap. And then I put the other 2 pumpkins 2 inches away from the center pumpkin. And once they were dry, I added the frame back onto the picture, and this is the project. Look at how pretty this is. I love doing things like this with things that I find at the Dollar Tree. I had so much fun. I've been making so many fall DIY projects that I cannot wait to share them with you. I have always wanted a Target bar cart. They had them a while ago and they were only $5. Well, you can't find them anymore, but thankfully I found this one at Goodwill. It just needed to be cleaned up a little bit. And I'm not sure if the wood was this color in the beginning, but after a little bit of scrubbing, I wasn't really happy with the color. So I used some gel stain and I darkened up both of those, I guess, 2 trays on the bar cart. I just used some gel stain. I got this at Hobby Lobby. It was super affordable. It was like 99 cents. So for this gel stain, all I did was paint it onto each of the wood pieces. Then I came back with a clean, dry towel and I just removed all of the excess stain. And that is what it ended up looking like. I think it's adorable. I love that color. I think it looks brand new. And I figured I'd put a few of my favorite fall decorations on the bar cart so you could see it too. I love the way this turned out. This is such a cute little tiered tray. So for this craft, it's actually a whole bunch of crafts. So I'm gonna be making some risers, and risers are so easy to make. You just take pieces of wood and then either wooden beads or spindles or the wooden snowmen you can find at Dollar Tree. Basically, whatever you wanna use for the feet, you can use. Then you can come back and finish it with some stain, or you could leave it plain if you wanted to. But I like to stain a lot of my risers, so I'll just use regular wood stain the entire thing, and then I have something really unique to add to my decorating. And as you can see, I like to do a lot of these at one time because that way I have all of these risers ready to be used whenever I need them. Now, a lot of these wood pieces I actually got in a scrap wood bundle kit on Amazon. It's really affordable and it's a really fun way to get a lot of wood pieces if you don't have access to a saw or a lot of different woods. And it's really fun to make little risers like this. But for the next part of the project, I had this scrap wood out in my garage, and what I did was just cut it down into various sized blocks. And then I brought the pieces back into my craft room and I sanded all of them so that they're nice and smooth. And I wanted to make pumpkins with these, so I didn't have any pumpkin stems, but I did have this dowel that was on the end of a heart from Dollar Tree. So I just used my little saw and cut down the dowel to be the sizes that I wanted them to be for my pumpkin stems. And then I came back with that gel stain again. I believe this is in cherry tone. And I just painted the dowels or stems with the gel stain, and then I wiped off any of the excess, just using a clean and dry cloth. And the one thing I didn't show you was that I painted all of these little blocks orange, and then I put some fall scrapbooking paper on one side. And then I came back with some distressing ink, and I just distressed all over each of the pumpkins. Not only did I do the scrapbooking paper part, but I also did the sides and the back of the pumpkin and the top as well. Each of the pumpkins got this distressing ink, and I believe this is in walnut. But this stuff is so much fun if you want to have your pieces have an aged appearance. This is really easy to use. And once I was done with my distressing, I used just a small amount of the Dollar Tree wood glue. This stuff is wonderful, and I attached the pumpkin stems. And when they were dry, I came back with some greenery stems that were like leaves, and I just hot glued those to the top of each of my pumpkins. Once I had the stems attached, then I took this craft paper, it's wired craft paper, and I twisted it around a paintbrush. And then when I pulled it off, I have these little curlicues, and these are so much fun to add to your homemade pumpkins. Then you just have to put a little hot glue, and you can attach a curlicue to each pumpkin. I did want to add a little bit of something extra, so I did put a little tiny bit of Spanish moss on each pumpkin, and then I came back with just a regular bow, just a tiny bow, and I attached a bow to each of the pumpkins. And here are the pumpkins, and they're sitting on one of the risers that I made. These were so much fun to make. They were so easy to make, and I made all of these pieces using scrap wood that I already had. Now, we've all seen these pumpkins at Dollar Tree. I really like these, but the one thing I wish is that they had a wood grain. So what I'm going to do is on the back of this pumpkin from Dollar Tree, I'm going to make it look like wood grain, I hope. So first I took a little sander and I just sanded the back. Now I tried to keep the strokes going in one direction the entire length of the pumpkin. Then I came back with a Cricut tool. I just carved lines into the pumpkin. I dug the weeding tool in just a little bit so that there would be deeper grooves and lines in the surface of the pumpkin. Then I came back with some folk art wax. Now I didn't paint this completely covering the entire surface of the pumpkin. I just put a little bit on, probably about half of the pumpkin, and then I took a clean dry towel and I just wiped off all of the excess. Now when I wiped it off, some of that wax got onto the other parts of the pumpkin, which is exactly what I wanted. Then I came back with a little bit of cream acrylic paint and I just drew in a couple of lines. Okay, more than a couple of lines. I drew in some lines on the top and the bottom portion of the pumpkin. The center I'm going to be painting, so that part doesn't really matter. Next, I used that same cloth that I had wiped off the wax on, and I just wiped off the excess of that cream colored paint. To me, this really looks like it has a wood grain in it now. I am very happy with that. Now I'm going to be painting the center orange, and I actually ended up doing this twice because the first time, well, the orange stripe is not as wide as I wanted it to be. But I just wanted to show you, this is how wide it ended up. I should have made it wider like I'm doing right here. And I'm just basically going to be repainting that orange onto the pumpkin. Now I did want to show you when I fold the painter's tape over, I really make sure to press the one edge that's going to be where I need that crisp line. Next, I came back with some more orange paint, and one I believe was pumpkin colored, and then there was a darker pumpkin color that I used, and it was almost out. So I had to really just shake the bottle to get the rest of that paint out. And then I just blended those two layers of paint together. And took a chip brush to make it all nice and smooth at the end. And then I removed the painter's tape again. Even if your project doesn't come out exactly how you wanted to, again, this is what's so fun with crafting. You can always go back and redo it. Next, I used my Cricut machine for the lettering, and it says Hello Pumpkin. I did do white vinyl for this. I could have done a stencil, but to make it easier, I just did the white vinyl. I put the word hello onto the orange portion of the pumpkin. And the pumpkin word is on the bottom of the pumpkin. Next, I focused on the top, and this is where I'm going to have all my embellishments and adornments. So I added in just lots of silk flowers or faux flowers. I started with some leaves, and then I had these, I don't even know what these berry bundles are called, but I put a couple of berry bundles on top of the leaves. And then I made a bow, and I found this ribbon at Hobby Lobby. It's in their fall section. So I made like a double bow, and then I secured that in place at the top of the pumpkin. And then I took a strip of that same ribbon, cut it in half, and these are going to be my tails. But what I did was just twist one end of the tail, and then I tucked it up under the bow. And this ribbon does have a wire edge, so it holds that shape pretty well. And I also had these doilies. They're like paper doilies. I think they're made for scrapbooking. So I just cut out a bow shape and put that on top of my bow. And then I came back with some more ribbon. This is from Dollar Tree, and I added another bow. I also added an extra set of tails for the plaid bow. And then I came back with a jute bow, and I put that right in the center. I also had these pumpkins that were extra, and I thought they might be kind of cute on either side of the bow. So I added them as well. And on those pumpkins, I did add some pip berries and a little wired craft paper squiggle. I am so excited with this project. I have been wanting to do this for so long, and I'm so happy that I finally did it. I love anything that says Hello Pumpkin, and I think this Dollar Tree pumpkin looks pretty darn cute. What do you think? I just love going to Hobby Lobby and finding clearance items like this sign. This is a pretty good size sign because these signs make perfect blanks for crafting. So I took a couple of different colors of orange, and I painted a pretty heavy coat of that onto the top of the sign. Then I came back with some cream color, and I added in a couple of lines, and I used a chip brush just to wipe that cream paint across my sign. I made sure to do the edges as well. And then I came back over it one more time with a smaller chip brush. Once it was all dry, I put a coat of Mod Podge on top of the sign. Once that was dry, I made a stencil of a pumpkin, and I really love this stencil, this pumpkin stencil, I guess, on a stenciling paper. So the stencil or the blue part will actually stay in place. And I carefully removed that transfer tape because there's a lot of little tiny parts in the pumpkin, and I don't want those to peel off. Now you may be thinking that I'm just going to be using an acrylic paint to stencil, but no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm going to be using this texture paste. This is an opaque texture paste that I found online. And this paste is going to give a raised appearance to my pumpkin. So I carefully just put lots of that texturing paste over top of my stencil. And once I was happy with how much I had on, I carefully removed the stenciling material. You have to go really slow with this because if you go too fast, you could pull off a lot of that texture medium. But if you go nice and slow, you can have like peaks and valleys and raised areas on whatever it is that you're creating. And this is my stenciled pumpkin. I think it looks fantastic. I love the different colors and I love the raised texture. I think it looks really awesome. I'm so happy with how this turned out. And the way that I painted the background, it kind of looks like wood too. Now when you're doing crafts, do you end up with lots of extra pumpkins? Oh, I know I do. So I decided to put these pumpkins to good use. The first thing I had to do was paint them. So I did mix some white acrylic paint with some chalk paint, and I painted over all of the white pumpkins that I had because I want them all to be the same color of white. I also did that with all of the gold pumpkins. Then I came back with some burnt umber paint and I painted all of the stems. Now on some of the pumpkins I didn't have stems, so I had to make them. And then on some of those stems, I had to come back and paint them the same color so that they would all look like they had the same type of stem. Next, I came back with this folk art metallic paint, and I believe this is in a copper color. I thought it would be so pretty against this Dollar Tree tray. And I had painted this Dollar Tree tray black, and it really seems to intensify that copper color. Now I want it to look kind of rough, so I'm just kind of pouncing the paint onto the top and the bottom of the tray. And once I was done with the bottom of the tray, I did come back and hit the top just one more time. And then I had these extra drawer pulls, so I pounced that metallic paint onto the drawer handles as well. And once everything had dried, I attached the drawer pulls to either side of the tray. Then once that was dry, I took all of my pumpkins and I hot glued them together, and this is the end result. Yes, it is just like a huge stack of pumpkins, but I thought this would be a fun way to use all of those extra little pumpkins that I had laying around, and I don't really have any use for them, so I made a big pile of pumpkins. Now I got these trays on Michaels. I think I got them on Michaels.com, and they're just little wood trays, and they were 99 cents each. So these are actually cheaper than what you can find at Dollar Tree. These are meant to hang up, but I'm not going to hang them up. So I just removed everything, including the hangers, and they had like jute hangers too. So they had double hangers on each one, and I removed everything from these trays. Then I came back with some Dollar Tree wood glue and I secured 3 trays together. So I'm going to be making a centerpiece. I'm pretty sure you figured that out by now. So I just used a little bit of Dollar Tree wood glue and secured the trays together. And to make sure that they were going to stay together, I used these Dollar Tree clamps just to make sure the little trays are going to stay where I want them to stay. Once that was dry, I came back. I used these wooden beads. I don't know if they're actually beads. I can't remember where I found these, but I'm using these as feet for the bottom of my tray. And the Dollar Tree wood glue is very strong, so it will give a permanent bond to whatever wood you're gluing together. And once that was dry, I came back with that gel stain again, and I believe this is either maple or cherry. I cannot remember. I think it's maple. But I just put a coat of that gel stain on all 3 of the trays and those wooden beads. And then using a clean cloth, I wiped away the excess. I did it on the bottom and I did it on all of the sides of the trays, which is now a centerpiece. And this is what it looks like when it's all dry. Next, I came back with these Dollar Tree cubes, and I was happy they came in a set of 3, and I hot glued a cube to each of those trays right in the center. Next, I came back with some Spanish moss and I filled the trays with the Spanish moss. I don't want to have it cover over the cube though in the center, just going all the way around. Spanish moss goes a long way too. You don't need very much of it, which is nice when you're crafting. And then I found this flower bundle at Hobby Lobby, and of course it's 40% off because it's fall. So I just disassembled it. I took all of the flowers, all of the leaves, everything, and put it into individual pieces. And then I just kind of played around and figured out where I wanted these to go in my display. I thought those larger berry bundles would look nice on the ends. And I really don't want to see those cubes, so then I used the leaves to cover up the cubes. Then I took little pieces of those berries and I put those over top and just kind of played around to really fill up this centerpiece. Next, I found these tumblers at Target, and they were actually really cheap. And then I took some rub and buff, and this is in antique gold, and I just brushed that around the top rim of each of those glasses. If you've never worked with rub and buff before, this is so much fun to craft with. And you don't have to use a lot of this product. So even though it's a small tube of the rub and buff, it will last a very long time. Once I was done, this is what my tumblers look like. Next, I came back with my hot glue gun and I secured a tumbler to each of those cubes. But this is for fall, so I took some Dollar Tree pumpkins. These came with 3 pumpkins and some leaves on each piece. So it took 2 stems to get all of the pumpkins that I wanted for this project. Then I secured the pumpkins in place, and using some cut up leaves, I'm going to add a little bit of that greenery to each of my pumpkins. And once I was done with that, I came back with some of the craft paper with wire curly cues. And this is the end result. And I did add in some battery powered candles, but this is the centerpiece. I think it looks so pretty. So pretty that I'm going to have to show you again. If you've enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button, and if you click the bell notification, you'll get an alert every time I have a new video coming out. And as you can tell, I've got a lot of projects in my mind that I have to make come to life. So I would love it if you would take a moment, hit the subscribe button, and be sure to come back for my next video.